I used to keep quite a lot of animals. I've always liked bird watching. That, I would say, seeded my interest in living organisms.
While I enjoyed the sciences, I was much more fascinated in becoming perhaps a poet, perhaps a writer.
I wanted to discover things that had never been known before, to almost swim against the tide.
Most people typically go into science because they're curious about the world around them. I actually went into science because I wanted to help people with Rett syndrome. That was my inspiration. I grew up in Beirut, Lebanon. My dad was an avid reader. He had a library that's floor-to-ceiling books. So I grew up with books and I loved reading. I fell in love with literature and wanted to be an English literature major. My mother was not happy about that. For her, for a woman, and not to have to rely on anyone was really important. And we went back and forth, and I decided, fine, I'll do medicine.
I was born to a middle-class sort of family. My father was a journalist. My mother was, as was typical at the time, a housewife. You could wander into fields and woods near where I lived, so it wasn't that difficult to encounter nature in all its glory. I always liked biology and, from a very early age, DNA. But I was never particularly good at being taught in school. And so getting into university these days would have been impossible for me. But fortunately, there was a new university called Sussex University just starting, and they let me in to study there. So I landed on my feet almost by accident in this excellent new biology department.
I started at the American University of Beirut in 1975, but it was during that year that the Civil War broke. Bombs were falling all around the campus. My parents felt it would be good to leave for the summer and come to the United States, and hopefully the war would be over. But sadly, that did not happen, and I finished my medical training there. I decided to do pediatrics and was accepted at Baylor College of Medicine and Texas Children's Hospital. And in 1983, Ashley came to the pediatric neurology clinic. Ashley was the very first child with Rett syndrome that I have seen, but she's one of many that I would meet throughout the years.
Several things happened in the annus horribilis 1986. My personal life was a bit chaotic, and that climaxed at that time. And in addition, the lab that I worked in was badly damaged by fire. I had, before the fire, applied to be the director of that unit, but the MRC unit was closed. And I decided to leave the country and go to Vienna, to a new institute, the Institute for Molecular Pathology. I was blissfully unaware of the disorder, Rett syndrome. I was working on DNA methylation and proteins that might read it. We found one that we called MECP2, and we managed to purify that. And it was pretty clear from the beginning that it's very abundant in brain, and then began the question of what it did.
When I moved into my own lab in 1988, I began my work in full force on Rett syndrome, just systematically brute force going gene by gene, sequencing them. It was 11 years of negative data and very little progress. In August of 1999, the phone was ringing, and it was Ruthie Amir. She was a postdoc in the lab. I think I found the Rett syndrome gene. I think I found the real mutations. You can only imagine how thrilled we both were, and we wrote the paper basically in 2 days.
I first heard about Huda Zoghbi's discovery that MECP2 was the gene mutated in Rett syndrome when I was sent a manuscript to review. The data was absolutely compelling, and suddenly I was confronted not only with the new science, but also with the consequences of not having this protein. And it changed our priorities almost immediately and meant that we were always on the lookout for the possibilities for therapy.
I was so excited to see Adrian discover this protein in 1992 because I felt I'm already starting with the frame of work that at the end of the day, we can all synergize from learning from each other and crossing paths.
I always have been fascinated by the natural world. Fortunately, I've been able to take that interest with me into my work, so I'm very lucky.
Mother insisted that I should really give medicine a chance, and I've really been so inspired by science and encountering Ashley and other girls with Rett syndrome.
While I'm still available on Earth, I would love to see someone cured of Rett syndrome because I'm absolutely confident that there is the potential to reverse many of the symptoms associated with this disease. I'm waiting with bated breath for that to happen.